Hey everyone, Dina here from the Willow Tree Chronic Pain and Trauma Summit. Today we're going to do things just a little differently. We're going to actually, I'm going to not be interviewed, instead just present to you some basic sleep strategies that you can use for both chronic pain and trauma. And the reason why we are addressing this, because if we are not sleeping, we are not healing. And sleep is one of the early things we can begin to address to be able to support your systems to be able to cope better with trauma or pain. Okay, so that is the reason why I think this is an important topic. So healing sleep for chronic pain and trauma. So it's my mission today to expand your sleep knowledge and know-how, to connect the dots between trauma, pain, and sleep disturbances, and to put some power back into your court by becoming your own sleep strategist. So what you'll learn today is a whole bunch of stuff, but mainly trauma and pain's effect on sleep, what sleep does for us, some sleep hygiene, our sleep systems, the biopsychosocial model of pain, which I spelled wrong there, sorry, trauma and sleep, and the slumberjack checklist. Now, the checklist is the thing at the very end that is your takeaway. And what I'm going to recommend about this is that you don't have to do the whole thing all at once. Just start to build your strategy little step by little step, because there's lots of things you can do within the checklist, but I don't want you to get overwhelmed with the process. Just understand that we're starting and then we're building. All right, some cool facts about you. So sleep is an evolutionary advantage. Insomnia is meant to protect us and allow time to deal with what's going on. Again, you keep hearing this throughout the summit, that all our systems are really here to protect, and sleep is one of those processes. Pain is an alarm system. It's meant to protect as well. And our bodies know when to prepare for lack of sleep, for example, with pregnancy. And our bodies, and when all the systems are working well, know to wake us 10 minutes around there before our alarm goes off. So it's a pretty incredible system to begin with. Some not so cool facts about sleep. Well, sometimes our protective measures go a little too far. That is true both for pain, trauma, and sleep. Medical training only gets 1 day of sleep training in their curriculum, and a mere 0 to 7 hours or days, of training for chronic pain total. So in their mandatory curriculum, they either get 0 or 7 hours. I've heard upwards of 12 for the whole curriculum. So not all doctors are chronic pain informed. Recently, in a study of 25,130 adults with 11 years of follow-up, so pretty significant study, chronic insomnia was significantly associated with the development of anxiety. And I would also say is often the underlying part of the equation that causes chronic illness, amplifies chronic pain. So there's a lot more to it than just the anxiety piece. So what does sleep do for us? Well, you've likely heard a lot of this already, but the cool thing is it forces us to be immobile. So that enforced immobility is important. We'll get into that. Conservation of effort and energy. It promotes optimal performance the next day. I think you have already experienced that before. Growth and tissue restoration, and enhances our immune function. Okay, so just a little bit of background about each of these. Enforced immobility is awesome because when we get into our REM sleep, where you're really getting into the dream state, it can get kind of violent. And if you are not immobile, then you could potentially hurt yourself or the person next to you. So that enforced immobility is really a safeguard. Conservation of effort and energy. Again, sleeping helps the body to heal. Promotes optimal performance the next day. That's kind of a given. Growth and tissue restoration. So again, we heal tissues, we rejuvenate tissues, we form new neural connections during sleep. We also help to enhance our immune function. We also, during sleep, the important process of sleep is partly that memory consolidation. So taking the memories of the day and putting it into a storage unit within our brain to regulate our moods, help us de-escalate all emotions. We'll touch on that in a second. And sleep is really our natural rinse cycle. So it helps to wash the brain and the nervous system of, for example, in Alzheimer's, those beta amyloids. But that general rinse flush of the brain is a really healthy process. So why would it be important to regulate our moods? Well, we know when it comes to chronic pain, moods will absolutely amplify or dial down your pain. Our emotions are always part of the physical pain that we experience, always, 100% of the time. And so if our emotions are a part of the pain experience and the sleep experience, that's why sleep becomes an important strategy to work with. Sleep disturbance and chronic pain. Likely many of you could already write the book about what chronic pain does to sleep based on your experience, but let's talk a little bit more about it. So research is showing that it takes longer to fall asleep with chronic pain. And you wake up more often and stay awake for longer with pain. So now we're tapping into all the sleep cycles. A shorter total sleep time, poorer sleep quality, and increases in sensitivity to pain. So if we're sleeping less, if we're getting interrupted sleep, if we are not getting quality sleep, then your sensitivity to pain will increase. And lack of sleep also impacts our balance overall. So falls, trips, getting back into acute injury because of falls is a larger challenge with lack of sleep. Increased risk of depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, and with insomnia, it's bidirectional. So it kind of goes both ways. So lack of sleep or sleep deprivation makes depression worse, and depression then makes sleep much more difficult. So it can be a bit of a messy mix. And finally, sleep and pain share similar pain processes. So for example, melatonin is involved in both processes. Melatonin helps to regulate the sleep cycle, which you likely already knew. But what's coming out now on research is that melatonin is also responsible partially for our pain perception. Pretty cool stuff. Okay, trauma and sleep disturbance. So there are a lot of overlaps between chronic pain and sleep disturbance and trauma. We're going to touch on some of the differences here. So what we know about trauma and sleep. Trauma affects our sleep cycles. That might be nothing new to a lot of our listeners. And they are learning that the REM sleep, which is that rapid eye movement, is the most affected by trauma. It's common to have distressing dreams, which includes details of traumatic events, which can be difficult because that's going to increase the cortisol levels and then wake you up more. And there's also this hyper arousal due to nervous sensitive. I'll try that again. Then there's also this hyper arousal due to nervous system sensitivity. Now, this sensitivity is prevalent both in chronic pain and in trauma. And so when our nervous system is hypersensitive, it means that you're more aroused, you're in that fight or flight mode, all the chemical cascade that happens as a result of that response, that sensitivity. So essentially, this becomes part of our understanding. This becomes part of our strategy. Research is also showing that getting enough sleep after a traumatic event can reduce trauma's effect on the body. They are showing that if you can get enough sleep after trauma, it may help to reduce the risk of PTSD. So, the imprint of childhood trauma on sleep is linked to disease into adulthood. So some of our presenters talked a little bit about that black cloud. And that is often, if you have been through a traumatic event, regardless of how big or small, other things start to happen. Health issues, mental health issues, bad luck in general. And so sometimes we can attribute it to the trauma, unresolved trauma. Okay, so I know that it can be difficult to sleep if you've been through some tough times. So I completely understand that. But if we can find ways to help you get a better night's sleep, that's going to be preventative in so many ways. All right. We already said that one. All right. So the irony about sleep. when it comes to chronic pain, especially, is seeking respite from the pain by sleeping, when falling asleep in itself is a struggle, and more often than not, the sleep obtained is light and disrupted with awakenings, leaving you feeling tired and unrefreshed the next morning, which then keeps that cycle going. And sleep has its own cycle for the good and for the bad. Chronic pain has its own cycle. Yeah. Okay, so sleep is meant to be a reflex. Just like heart rate, breathing, and other processes, it happens on its own, or it should. If we are trying to sleep, we are trying too hard. So this is why we are here, to make it less work and more reflexive. So I understand completely that when you're not sleeping, it becomes non-reflexive, meaning, you have to think a whole lot about ways to fall asleep. And when you wake up in the middle of the night and you have those ruminating thoughts and you're trying to find your way back to sleep, I'm going to try and share some strategies to help you through that, so that it can become less of something you have to think about and more reflexive. Okay, so I'm about to show you, if it works, my technology is going to help me out here, on a little video I created a while back. You're going to have to excuse the music. It's not very good, but our 2 sleep systems, because I think it's important to understand a little bit of context about what we're talking about. So I'm going to crank up the volume so you can hear. Please excuse the music. Our sleep systems explained. We have 2 important sleep systems. The first one is our circadian, which is known as your internal clock, or your alerting system. It's responsible for telling our brain what chemicals to release when, which in turn helps to control all the other internal clocks. The second system is our homeostatic, and it's our sleepy system. This process lets us know when we are sleepy. It's what helps us to build up our sleep drive during the day. When the sun comes up, our circadian system starts to kick in. Both tell our brain it's time to wake up, and so our brain starts sending out cortisol and adrenaline for us to get up and get going. It also tells the brain to stop producing the sleepy hormones like melatonin and GABA. From the very moment you wake up, the brain and the body start to build your sleep drive. The brain does this by taking in cues such as light, temperature, noise, connecting with others, and meaningful activity. When you move your body, the energy used to power that movement begins to produce and accumulate a chemical called adenosine in your brain. The more adenosine you build up throughout the day, the more sleepy you begin to feel, making it easier to fall asleep at night. By keeping a regular sleep schedule, sleep becomes more of a reflex and less of a worry. After you fall asleep, your body cycles through the sleep phases a couple of times, which then drains the brain of all the adenosine so that it can reload the next day. Then, the circadian system starts to kick in again before you awake to block the sleepy hormones and kick in the excitatory ones. You awake only to begin the cycle all over again. All right. Again, apologies for the music. Okay. So what's important about what you just learned there? First of all, the body is pretty amazing, I have to admit, even though you doesn't feel that way. Sometimes I bring on the science to be able to showcase how amazing you guys really are. Key takeaways. We build up sleep pressure or drive throughout the day. And there's that crazy chemical called adenosine. And we produce that during the day. And meaningful movement or some sort of activity, moving your body a little bit, is the most important way to build adenosine during the day. So it doesn't have to be a lot, doesn't have to be going to the gym. Just moving your body a little bit helps to build up that adenosine. A predictable schedule is what the sleep system prefers for optimal performance. So if you can get up at the same time every day, your body will eventually adapt to that, and it much prefers it. And some of the important sleep cues are light and dark. So when the sun comes up and then when the sun goes down, those are cues to get our circadian rhythms in check. Temperature, social activity, noise, and quiet. I put the social activity in there because I think that's an important one to understand as well, because if we are missing out on social activity, phoning friends, connecting with others, that also is going to impact sleep. Okay, the BPS model of pain and sleep. Why is this important? Because it just gives you the big picture. Everything we do here at Pain to Possibilities and the Change Pain Academy comes down to understanding the big picture around pain. And that includes the biopsychosocial model of pain. We're going to get into it. Okay. Sleep and pain are affected by three important things, three important groupings. So if you look at this stool here, it's got 3 legs. And all 3 legs are equally important for stabilizing that support structure on top. So if you were to sit on top of that stool with 3 legs, you would have a stable surface. The 3 legs are represented by the biological aspect, the psychological aspect, and the social. Again, all 3 are important. If you were to take away one of those legs, you would have a not so stable stool. If you took away 2 of those legs, you would have a very unstable surface to sit on. And that is exactly what our medical model, unfortunately, currently does, is the biological. Unless you live in a country that will also include the psychological, which is not always the case, but okay. So the biological, some examples of the biological are things like nutrient deficiencies that are causing sleep disturbances, underlying issues that you might have, like restless leg syndrome or sleep apnea. If there's any sort of genetically predisposed stuff, like maybe you don't produce enough adenosine, maybe your circadian rhythm is off for reasons related to disease or other biological components. Maybe you have ADHD. Maybe you don't even know you have ADHD. That often leads to sleep disturbances as well. If you've been in a car accident or have sustained a brain injury, those are the biological pieces. The psychological pieces are not saying it's all in your head, although those are often the messages you're hearing. It's things like the daytime stress that will increase the cortisol levels, the fight or flight response. It is the anxiety or depression that you often experience with chronic pain. It is the catastrophizing or that worst case scenario worry that you might experience with chronic pain. It is the thoughts, the beliefs, all of those things tied in to the psychological. So important part here, the more we worry about sleep, the more cortisol we unintentionally produce, which keeps us awake longer. Okay. The social piece is kind of all the other stuff. So any life events on the horizon to amplify worry, like a new baby, a new home, or finances, loss of a job, all those things will impact sleep. Not engaging in social activities, isolating yourself, removing yourself from activities you used to love doing, work stress, if you live in a stressful environment, healthcare. Are you feeling like you're getting sufficient healthcare, or do you feel like you're getting insufficient healthcare? That will also impact pain and sleep. And of course, the environment you're in. So insomnia, as we mentioned, is an evolutionary advantage. How? Well, sleep is adaptable, just like we are. We are suited for survival. So is sleep. So we think about humans hearing the twig snap outside the cave and being awake to be able to survive the lion attack. We don't want to sleep through that. So our systems, our innate systems, are really set up to help us. Sleep is adaptable. Now, because it's adaptable, it can sometimes, if we start doing things like we live with a constant state of sleep disruption, we've adapted to poor sleep. Okay, so we just need to help you unwind those habits a little bit. There are some upsides to insomnia. Now, this is when things are working well. I'm not saying chronic fatigue here or chronic, sleep deprivation, but one of the upsides is it allows or affords you a few extra hours in the day to help you figure out why you are not sleeping. So why allow the body to sleep when you are threatened by something or when you are so upset? So it is your body's way of trying desperately to protect you and to allow you a little time and space to be able to maybe work through what the issues are before you get to sleep. And I love this one because it's such a strong, positive reframe. Okay. I think it's important to understand when you are struggling with your sleep and you're really frustrated with your body, to understand that it really is trying to do its best to help out. And as we mentioned before, when we worry about not sleeping, we are unintentionally releasing more of that cortisol. Okay, so that's going to increase the threat level, which is going to wake you up in that hyper arousal state. So insomnia does exist to help you. Unfortunately, if it becomes chronic insomnia, it's just a little bit broken, so to speak. Not broken. It's not functioning as well as it could, not serving you as well. So the amygdala, which is a really cool part of your brain, is kind of like a switch. It's either on or it's off, and it tells your body if it's on for fight or flight. If it's turned off, then it's a signal to your brain that you are safe. And so, unfortunately, when you live with chronic pain or unresolved trauma, that amygdala, is always on. It's most often in that fight or flight response. And so if we can learn to be able to switch it off, because there are ways to do that, then and convince the brain that you are safe, then it's easier to get into a restful sleep. And that is regardless if it's psychological or actual a physical threat. So if you're thinking it's a threat or if it actually is a threat, both apply. And that's just like chronic pain. Okay, so sleep hygiene and behaviors. You've likely heard a lot about sleep hygiene already. We're going to go through some of them, but I want to try and highlight some of the ones that maybe you don't know about, or at least ones that are really important to reemphasize. So the most impactful sleep hygiene behavioral practices are these. Sleeping in a dark room, and maybe even eye covers if you can tolerate that on your face. Okay, if there's no neuralgia of the face, then that might be an option. The body loves the light and the dark to regulate its circadian rhythm. Pillows, body pillows to get into a comfortable position, a decent mattress, those are all helpful. No sleep surfing. I'll explain what that means in a moment, but this is the important part here. That chemical adenosine actually builds up 4 times faster in the middle of the night than it does in the daytime. So the lesson here is, if you are not able to sleep in the middle of the night, get up and build more of that adenosine so that you can get back to sleep, as opposed to lying in bed, ruminating thoughts, trying so hard to fall asleep, which I am guilty of myself. Get up, go listen to some music, try not to get on your phone if you can, listen to or read a book, listen to a book, find a quiet corner, perhaps meditate if that's what you choose to do. So some choices there. Okay, so sleep surfing is just when you're lying in bed and you're kind of surfing in and out of light sleep and wakefulness. For example, you're awake for 30 minutes and then you fall asleep for 30 seconds and you get those little micro sleeps. So if you can get up at the same time every day to regulate sleep systems, regardless of how much sleep you got the night before, which I know can be difficult, go to bed when you feel sleepy. Okay, we'll talk about this one, but limit napping, or at least before noon and for 20 minutes, so not to deplete that adenosine. Self-soothing before bedtime to calm the overreactive nervous system. Okay, let's talk about a few of these. Again, I know it can be difficult if you live with chronic fatigue or fibro, or you're suffering from sleep deprivation. Getting up at the same time every day can be a really daunting process. But if you are allowing yourself to get into that habit, then you will notice a little bit of a shift. The whole napping conversation, I'm not against naps, but I do want to make sure that we have some parameters around it, because it can mess with your sleep patterns. Although I do know that there are days when you just need a good nap. But if you do, try and do it earlier in the day, and maybe set your alarm so that you are not depleting all of that adenosine so that you can get to sleep later on at night. Okay. Microsleeps, like we talked about, does further deplete that adenosine, so it is going to be harder to sleep. And we cannot sleep because we don't have enough of those chemicals in our system. So again, get up, read, relax, have a snack if you need to, listen to some music until you start to feel sleepy again. That's that chemical starting to build up again. Then you can go to sleep. Okay, I already talked about this. This is a little bit redundant. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's talk about your Slumberjack checklist. How it works. It introduces new sleep behaviors, or you may already be doing some of these. It just sort of validates what you're doing. Introduces some regularity to your sleep schedule, which ultimately, long-term, is going to serve you better. It addresses sleep as a whole process for a whole person. In the corner, you'll see this little sleep matrix that I've created. It just kind of encompasses the whole of you, the whole biological, the psychological, and the social. And it includes daily actionable steps to change our behavior around sleep. Okay, like I mentioned early in this presentation, don't feel like you have to do it all at once. You're just going to take one piece at a time and tackle it step by step. Okay. It also, includes time for rest and digest, coming out of that fight or flight response, because if we are hyper aroused during the day, it will affect our sleep at night. So it's important to weave in that parasympathetic or that rest and digest state throughout your day, even if it's just for a few minutes here and there. The other thing, not only is it going to benefit your sleep, but it's also going to help dial down your pain. So really, it's a great strategy, regardless if it's related to sleep or not. Okay, here it is. Your Slumberjack daily checklist. So I put it in a checklist form just so that you can pick and choose which ones you want to use, but start in the morning. A good sleep strategy starts in the morning. Wake up at the same time each day if you can. And so if you are committed to doing this, you can put this on paper, say, I will wake up at, and then state your time. So let's say 8 o'clock every day and then state how many weeks you'd like to try it out for. Okay. One good thought to start the day with. So for example, today I'm thankful for blank, or my win for today will be blank. Okay. The reason why we're doing this, because this just taps into the whole science behind pain and the brain. If you can even start your day thinking about something other than the pain, something that's more hopeful, that triggers a healthier response in the brain. So it's not woo-woo science. It actually is a great habit to get into, and it has its cascade effect. That's why I put it in here. Okay, so I'm going to challenge you to try and think of something that you are thankful for. It might be difficult, but I'm going to challenge you regardless to try and do it. If you can, whenever, start to include a balanced breakfast. Okay, balance is important. So getting a little bit of color in your fruits and vegetables, and then adding a protein to it. Protein comes in many forms. You can Google it. You'll notice there's lots of options. Protein helps you to balance out your emotions, your blood sugar. It's going to help with the hormonal response throughout your day so that you can get a better night's sleep. And if you are going to nap, try to nap for a shorter period of time before noon or in and around noon. Okay. Midday. All right. So if you can weave in 5 to 30 minutes of meaningful activity, doesn't matter what it is. It could be sitting, doing exercises. It could be arms above the head. It could be walking to your mailbox. It could just going downstairs to get something from the kitchen and then going back upstairs again. It comes in many forms. Whatever movement you feel you can do safely and without pain or a pain flare. We want to keep it within your limits, but start small. Okay. And if you can, at some point, find something meaningful. Can you connect with a loved one, connect with a friend, just send a text, have a phone call, reach out to a family member. We just need to reconnect. And we're addressing the social aspect of sleep. And if you can weave in some sort of soothing activity, whether it be just listening to music, sitting down, calm for 5 minutes. Again, this does not have to be a big commitment. Definitely no caffeine after 2 o'clock, because that will definitely keep you awake. And in the evening, Again, you don't have to do all of these at once. Start slowly, but magnesium glycinate is probably the easiest way, safest way to start some sort of supplementation to help you out with your sleep. Okay, so there's some numbers there that you can utilize as well, or have a banana before bed. Restrict alcohol before bed. That will disrupt your sleep. So if you are using alcohol as a coping mechanism, just know that that is likely affecting your sleep. Okay. Melatonin can be used as well. You can always ask your doctor first if you felt that, you want to make sure that it works well with your medication. How often can you take it? Melatonin is a great option. And then tapping into your emotions before you go to bed. How am I feeling? Am I charged right now? Am I emotionally charged? Am I feeling sad? Am I feeling frustrated? Or am I feeling calm? I think it's good to check in, perhaps understand why and where it's coming from so that you can address it. So if you are feeling emotionally charged, that's a good time to be able to do some calming activities to be able to help you fall asleep. Okay, pre-bedtime affirmation, maybe listen to a meditation session. And again, if your mind is racing and you're listening, that's okay. Sometimes it's hard to shut down, but at least you're starting that process. At least you're starting to connect sort of the brain with the body, perhaps with some breathing and listening is also very helpful. Okay, so that is your Slumberjack daily checklist. I will leave this for you in the dashboard page. And as always, please reach out if you have any questions, but put this one, print it off, put it somewhere that it's visible, and just start building your strategy step by step. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I appreciate you guys being here.